I also know Adrian. And what a pleasure it is.
You don't always say that.
Yeah, wow.
And that's because we work together.
Yeah. So having heard both Adrian and Heather speak, I'm wondering if I'm actually their love child. Just conceptually for the purpose of this meeting. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Hi, my name is George Oates, and I'm the founder of a small company called Museum in a Box. And thank you to Alex and Adrian for asking me to come and share the story, because I think it fits right in the middle of what we're here for today. And I'm freaking out right now, so frankly it'll be really good to talk to you about why I'm freaking out. Not personally speaking right now, but just where the company's at. So a little bit about me. I've been a software designer now for over 20 years, mostly focused on the web. I've had great success designing products that millions of people have used, like the photo sharing service Flickr, which went live in 2004, and I was there at the very beginning, worked there for about 5 years, so that was a huge and hilarious and amazing ride. But in 2008, I created a program at Flickr called The Commons, which was about getting public photography collections into the Flickr community. And our first partner there was the Library of Congress in the United States. But it was really working on the Commons about 10 years ago that I was bitten by the cultural heritage bug, and since then I've worked around libraries and archives and museums, and I love them so much that I made a company called Museum in a Box. We incorporated back in October 2015 with the core goal of helping museums increase access to their collections. When you pitch to people, you're supposed to say what the problems are that you're trying to solve. So I thought, this guy having to stay in a cupboard all day instead of being seen by people was one of the problems that we're trying to solve. So, apparently most museums only show about 5% of their collections on the museum floor, and the rest is in the dark, never seen by mere humans. We're wondering how we can change that balance. And the second thing we're trying to help with is that the digital experience of cultural materials is pretty bad. You're faced with pages and pages of dull information, and every object at the British Museum is presented to you in exactly the same viewport on a website. Your senses of touch and hearing are completely removed from the equation. And that's a really sort of passive and uninspiring way to interact with these kinds of stories. So at Museum in a Box, we're trying to change the direction. So this is the normal model of cultural engagement, where museums often expect people to visit them, to cross their threshold and go into their galleries. But not every kid can visit a museum, because sometimes even the cost of getting a bus from your school to a museum is prohibitive. Sometimes students have to pay for that themselves, or their families do. It's not like everybody says to me, why don't you just take the kids to the museum? It's really not that simple. You might live in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico, and there's not a museum for 300 miles, So no matter how free or accessible or interesting museums make themselves, not everybody can get there. So we're reversing that model, and we want to bring collections from any museum in the whole world to anywhere where there's a box, by using a few technological smarts. I brought a box in here just to, if you want to have a play, but basically this is the box, this is the hardware, and you can either use a 3D printed object like Mr. Einstein. He has an NFC sticker on him. You can also use a postcard, which also has an NFC sticker, and you just put it on the box.
I believe that Gandhi's views were the most enlightened of all the political men in our time. We should strive to do things in his spirit, not to use violence in fighting for our cause, but by non-participation in anything you believe is evil.
So that's actually archival recording of Mr. Einstein himself, which is pretty cool. yeah, so that, I mean, that's really the whole idea right there. So yeah, do please have a play. But you know, we also have a business plan. So far, we've had actual customers, which is amazing. We've had commissions with some of the biggest museums in the world, like the British Museum and the V&A in London and the Smithsonian Institution. So that's given us enough income to just creep forward slowly in a design entrepreneurial kind of way. And like Adrian was saying, just sort of not trying to burst your banks, but you know, earn a bit of money and test the product as you go. And that's been great, and you know, I was deliberately trying to hook big fish because it helps with the marketing of the idea, if you can say the British Museum does this. But yeah, right now we're actually working on our second type of product, or type of museum in a box, which is called Make Your Own. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but the basic idea is that kids can curate their own sets of museum objects and make their own stories that come out of the box. And hopefully one day even make the box itself as well. And then stitch it all together for a show and tell. And later, we hope to sort of, you know, have this bigger library of content in the system. So if I've got one of these in my lounge room in Liverpool and I'm super into reptiles, I can subscribe to reptiles, and then every, 3 months or something I'll get a box of treats about reptiles from museums all over the world. Or maybe, a class from a high school here in Liverpool that made a box about lizards. That's a long way away though. So everything we're doing, both our commissions and the Make Your Own kits, are all designed to try to build this library of content. Collections of museum objects or personal objects that people have gathered themselves, and the stories that they like to write about them. Super into what kids are going to do with this idea. Here are some of the partners we've had so far, as I said. One of our more recent commissions was to make an Egyptian tomb in a box that was to be sent out to schools in rural Victoria, which is a state in Australia. That was really awesome, actually. They fabricated their own kind of tomb-like box and basically just bought a whole bunch of Anubis and canopic jars from museums and stuck all the stickers on them, and the kids absolutely loved it. They really loved it. Another example is a very small commission, or a modestly sized commission, I should say, for the V&A in London. You can see there's a box in an exhibition space, and I actually brought the postcards from that exhibition in case you want to listen to them. But the exhibition was called Seeing Red, Posters of Protest and Dissent. And these printmakers, these feminist printmakers, were making these posters in East London in the 70s, not too far from where the actual exhibition was. And when you boot these cards on the box, you can hear from the printmakers themselves about what it was like to work in East London at the time, and all the asshole men that sort of vandalised their print studio and all that kind of stuff. But the good thing about this is, for me, when the exhibition was closed, the box could also come out of the exhibition space and go into a couple of the local high schools. And the V&A, while they were in the classroom, they were talking to the teenagers and just asked them to provide a response to what had happened. So, issues like domesticity and equality and violence, what's changed from the 70s to today. And then they recorded those responses and put them back into the exhibition. So you can go and hear from the printmakers, but also teens today about those same issues. So it's a very flexible little thing turning out to be. So if we just sort of zoom out for a second, this is a very blobby map of our current box distribution. And in terms of scale, I was trying to think how many boxes we've actually made. And I think it's probably maybe 35 total, something like that.
That's about right.
Yeah, our biggest run was supposed to be 20, but one of our orders for amps from China fucked up, and we only got 14 amps in the order of 20, so we were only able to make 14 boxes, and I was really pissed off about that, because we needed all 20 boxes. But there's even a box in Baghdad, which is kind of wild. So yeah, this Make Your Own pilot, as I mentioned a moment ago, we're working on it right now, and in June we put out an open call on the web for anybody who was interested to join, and we got responses from all over the world. We got 20 in a couple of days, and so we're like, oh, well, maybe we'll just leave it open for a little bit longer. Now we've got 40, and we don't quite know how to do it. I mean, we sort of do. We definitely know how to make the boxes, but we're designing kits, and there's a plan and everything. But there's also still a lot of questions and a lot of learning to be done to send 40 physical things around the world, then listen to what everybody thinks about them, gather the feedback, do a round of product development, and the goal is to make the product ready for sale. So after we put out this call, it suddenly dawned on me that we didn't actually have any money to do the pilot. And I was in one of these accelerator programs over the summer at the Young Foundation in London, and that's a foundation for social good in the education sector. They were doing those sort of lockstep, figure out your revenue, figure out your expenses, give me a 3-year projection, make me a graph that goes up and to the right, so I can point you to some investors. And I do have that graph. It's not in the, but it does go up and to the right. I mean, don't get me wrong, the foundation's great, but I did feel somewhat like I was in this little sort of hamster wheel. I did look into a lot of the investment options that the foundation presented actually too, but all of them take months, and all of them you have to build relationships and make lots of grant applications and all that kind of stuff, and I'm just a bit impatient for that, so I thought we'd give it a shot on Crowdfunder. Sorry, Heather. But I didn't feel like this was where we were at. Wasn't quite fit. Didn't quite fit for Kickstarter for me, because it was about doing a research pilot. It wasn't about if you give us 200 quid, you get a box in a few months. We were funding exploration and design. So anyway, we managed to get 20 grand, and Crowdfunder took a couple of grand, but that's okay. And now we've got some cash to play around with for the first time in the company's history, which is great. But it's immediately eaten up by making lots of boxes, paying people, which of course we should do. So the expenses, we're managing the budget, but it's also, there's not much fluff, there's not much fat in it, and that can be really tiring. But the good thing is, the pilot looks fantastic, and I think it's going to really help us make your own product really strong. And this is just a selection of the people in the pilot, which is a really good cross-section of the companies that I think are going to actually end up buying the thing. But then this week I wanted to tell you, because this is certainly a story of scale, or scary scale. So there's this Los Angeles kind of video journalist article blog thing called ATTN that I'd never really heard of until they wrote us a note and said, we really like what you're doing, can we make a video? And it was on Facebook, and you can't see down there, but it had almost 250,000 views just this week, which has been kind of overwhelming actually, because we were just sort of, comfortably planning the pilot, and we're going to make 40 boxes, and that's really cool, and in 6 months we'll kind of know what we're doing. And now I've got an inbox with 100 teachers saying, can I have a box please? And then we decided, radical move, to put a button on the website that says pre-order a box, which we hadn't really even thought of doing. Overnight we've got 70 people writing to us saying, when could we have a box? And we still haven't said how much a box is, or when they can have it, or even really how it works. I'm just I feel like such an idiot. But it's super exciting, but as we said, you can be having the most thrilling time, but the reality is, all your cash is accounted for, you can't do more than, you can't exceed your means, la 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 la. So I just thought I'd leave you with a few questions. I don't know if this will prompt the discussion, but this is kind of where my head is at right now. I don't want to be in charge of a company that does manufacturing. I'm just not really interested in that, so I'm looking for ways to avoid it. I think for now, because we're starting to actually quantify real demand for the thing, I like the idea of operating in small batches. So once we get 100 pre-orders, we still have to work out how we take their money, of course. We wouldn't do an order without money, so there's a lot of work hidden in there, but maybe we just do small batch releases for a while. I think the make your own product, so we don't have to, is also really intriguing. Can it get to the point where we just, put the design for this online. Maybe we sell it for a couple of bucks even. I don't know if it should be free or not. But, you know, there are more and more sophisticated makerspaces happening all over the world all the time now. And maybe you can just also make that as part of your education experience, as well as, you know, the collections and stuff. You know, what if we never manufacture anything? What does that mean? What sort of, you know, how do we account for that? And one of my friends asked me, well, what if the box itself is a bit of a sacred cow? Which is, I'm still thinking about that. But, you know, this idea of to sort of design something so anybody can recreate it, I think is, you know, where we're heading to. And as a company who wants to be a profitable company, even though its heart is in social good, how do we work out what we should give away for free? Like, is that the thing we should give away for free? Or should we keep it, or should we charge a bit? I mean, these are all sort of active questions that we're thinking about right now. So, anyway, that was a bit of a blip, but let's have a chat.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.